Richie Sambora on the guitar.
All right, Richie, welcome aboard. On drums. Wait a minute, he's playing with the cameraman back there. What is this?
Yes. Tico Torres on the drums.
Welcome back.
The veteran of bandstand.
The Daniel Boone here. Yes, Spy Can. Where'd you get?
It's April 2013. Bon Jovi is in the middle of one of the biggest tours on the planet. Tens of thousands of fans are already in their seats. The lights are going down. And then, nothing. No Richie. No explanation. Just gone. Not fired. Not sick. Not fighting with anyone. At least, not in the way you'd think. Just gone. And here's the part that still messes with people's heads. Jon Bon Jovi had talked to him the day before, Easter Sunday. Everything sounded completely fine. And then the next day, Richie Sambora, the man who helped write Livin' on a Prayer, the guy who had been with this band for 30 years, simply did not show up. Now, everybody at the time assumed they knew what happened. Drugs, drama, a massive blow-up backstage, the usual rock and roll disaster story, right? But what really went down is so much more complicated and, honestly, so much more human than any of those rumors gave it credit for. And a decade later, Richie finally told the truth, the whole truth. So let's talk about it, because this story, it deserves to be told properly. Let's go back to the beginning. Not to 2013, but to where this whole thing really started to crack. By the time the 2010s rolled around, Bon Jovi wasn't just a band anymore. It was a corporation, a brand, a machine that ran on touring revenue, merchandising deals, and the relentless obligation to keep the product moving. And look, that's not necessarily a criticism. These guys worked insanely hard to build something that massive. But here's the thing about machines. They don't care how you're feeling. Richie had spent the better part of 3 decades inside that machine. 30 years of stadiums, tour buses, hotel rooms that all looked the same, red-eye flights to cities you can barely remember, and a schedule that left zero room for anything resembling a normal human life. Now, most of us watching this, we were probably thinking, oh, come on, you're a rock star. That's a pretty good problem to have. And yeah, fair enough. But here's what people forget. The bigger the band, the bigger the pressure. And by 2013, Bon Jovi wasn't playing clubs in New Jersey anymore. This was a global operation. The Because We Can tour was massive. And underneath all of that success, Richie was quietly falling apart. Here's where I want to pause and ask you something directly, because I genuinely want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where everything looked fine from the outside, but on the inside you were running on fumes? Where you were showing up every day, but a part of you had already left? Because that, in essence, is exactly what was happening to Richie Sambora, and it didn't happen overnight. Let's talk about the personal stuff, because you can't understand the 2013 exit without understanding everything that was falling apart in Richie's life at the same time. First was the Heather Locklear divorce. Now, if you were around in the 90s and early 2000s, you know exactly how big that was. Heather Locklear wasn't just any celebrity. She was one of the most famous women in Hollywood. Their split was ugly, public, and messy in ways that the tabloids absolutely devoured, and Richie was living through all of that while simultaneously trying to be a functioning member of one of the biggest rock bands on earth. That is an enormous amount to carry, and so he started relying on substances to get through it. Not because he was weak, but because when you're exhausted and grieving and nobody in your professional world is asking how you're actually doing, you start looking for something to take the edge off. That's not a rock star cliche. That's just what humans do when they're overwhelmed and they've got no off switch. Now here's where the story gets really interesting, because this is the part that surprised even me when I dug into it. Jon Bon Jovi, in multiple interviews since 2013, has been very clear. There was no big dramatic fight, no ultimatum, no screaming match backstage. He told Classic Rock magazine something that honestly just stops you cold. He said he talked to Richie the day before, Easter Sunday, 2013. He was driving through the Lincoln Tunnel in New York. He said the album was about to go #1, everything felt good, and then Richie asked if he could just stay home one more day. Jon said sure, of course. And then Richie never came back. Jon's exact words were something like, he quit the band. He was emphatic about it. Nobody fired Richie Sambora. Nobody pushed him out. He made the call himself, quietly, without ceremony. in a way that absolutely nobody saw coming, including the people closest to him. And I think that's the part that hits hardest. It wasn't a blow-up. It was a slow, quiet breaking point that finally just broke. Now, if you're new here, this is Hidden Fame Files, and this is exactly the kind of story we dig into. The real stuff behind the headlines, the moments that got buried under rumors and speculation. If you've been here before, you already know what we do. And if you're finding value in this story right now, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps us keep these stories coming. And honestly, if this is the first video you've watched and you're already this deep in, the subscribe button is right there. You know what to do. Okay, so Richie's gone. The tour continues without him. The band brought in a Canadian guitarist named Phil X, pretty much on zero notice, to fill in. Now, Phil X is a genuinely exceptional guitarist, but he wasn't Richie, and every single fan in every single arena knew it. The months passed, then a year, then two, and slowly what started as Richie is dealing with some personal stuff started to become the obvious. He was not coming back. By 2016, Phil X was officially a permanent member of Bon Jovi, and Richie, he was home with his daughter. Ava Sambora, who's in her mid-20s now, by the way, and absolutely stunning, very much her mother's daughter, was the anchor. She was the reason. Richie said it himself. I really needed to take some time to be with my daughter. She needed me, and I needed her, actually. That's not the answer people expected. That's not the dramatic rock and roll meltdown story. That's a father who looked at his life and said, my kid needs me more than this tour does. And here's something that I think gets lost in all the noise. The 2024 documentary finally gave us Richie's side in his own words, without a PR filter, without someone else framing it for him. In Thank You, Good Night, the Bon Jovi story on Hulu, Richie sat down and said something that I think is genuinely brave. He said, I don't regret leaving the situation, but I regret how I did it. That's a subtle but really important distinction. He's not saying he was wrong to leave. He's saying he wishes he'd done it differently, more gracefully, with more communication. Because one of the things that also came out in that documentary, there was creative tension brewing long before Calgary. Richie was increasingly absent from studio sessions while they were recording What About Now? The producer, John Shanks, was basically filling in on guitar tracks. And when Richie would show up to the studio, reportedly, everything was already done. He felt sidelined. He felt like the band had gone stale. And he felt like his voice, literally and creatively, wasn't being heard anymore. Now here's a question for you, and I want your honest take in the comments below. Do you think Richie Sambora should have stayed and fought for his creative space within the band? Or was walking away the right call, even if the timing was rough? Because there's no easy answer there, and I suspect a lot of people watching this have had that exact same crossroads at some point. Not in a rock band, obviously, but in a job, a partnership, a situation where you had to decide, do I stay and suffer, or do I go and start over? Now, let's fast forward to 2018, because for one shining, almost unbelievable night, the story had a moment of closure. Bon Jovi was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Richie showed up. He was there. He got on stage with Jon, with the rest of the guys, and they played together one more time. And if you've seen the footage, there's something about watching those two share a stage again that just gets you. Because whatever happened between them, whatever was left unsaid, you could feel in that performance that the music was always real. The brotherhood, underneath all the tension and the business and the heartbreak, it was real. Jon has said repeatedly since then that there's no bad blood, no animosity. They're not enemies, they're not even strangers. Richie even went over to Jon's house and watched parts of the documentary with him. That's not the behavior of two guys who hate each other. That's complicated. That's the kind of relationship you can only have with someone you've been through war with for 30 years.
Here's where we are right now, in 2025. As of the most recent reports, Richie Sambora will not be rejoining Bon Jovi for any upcoming tours. TMZ confirmed it. Sources close to the situation were pretty blunt about it. That chapter is done and over. Those were the words. And Jon, to his credit, has been gracious about it. He said publicly that there's always love there, even if they're on different paths now. Richie, meanwhile, has been focused on solo projects, more personal, more introspective music, charity work, occasional guest appearances at events, a quieter life, a life that actually fits him now, rather than the one that was slowly crushing him. And you know what? For someone who spent 30 years giving everything to a machine that never stopped demanding more, I think that's actually a happy ending, or at least the start of one. And this is where I want to stop and give this story the framing it deserves, because there's a temptation to look at Richie Sambora's exit from Bon Jovi as a failure, a breakdown, a cautionary tale about addiction and broken friendships and opportunities thrown away. But I think that's exactly backwards. What Richie Sambora did, even if the execution was messy, even if it caused pain, even if it left tens of thousands of fans confused and disappointed in an arena in Calgary, was choose himself. He chose his daughter. He chose his actual life over the performance of his life. And in a world that constantly tells people, especially people his age, to just push through, to honor your commitments, to keep the machine running no matter what, that took real courage. The 2024 documentary makes it clear that by the time he walked away, Richie wasn't just tired, he was broken, and staying would have broken him further. Leaving, as painful and abrupt as it was, might have literally saved his life. I want to ask you one more thing before we wrap up, and this one's personal. Is there someone in your life, a musician, an artist, a public figure from your generation, whose story you think got completely misread by the media? Someone who got labeled as a train wreck or a quitter, when really they were just a human being trying to survive something nobody fully understood? Drop it in the comments, seriously. Because if there's one thing we love doing here at Hidden Fame Files, it's finding those stories and giving them the space they never got the first time around. One more thing before you go, and I'm going to say this quickly because I genuinely believe in it. YouTube recently launched something called the Hype feature. If you're watching this and you feel like this story deserved more than 5 minutes and a tabloid headline, if you think Richie Sambora's side of things finally got told the right way today, hit that Hype button. It helps get this video in front of people who haven't found us yet. Costs you nothing, takes 2 seconds, and it means the world for a channel like this one trying to do real storytelling about real people. So, let's bring it home. Richie Sambora joined Bon Jovi in 1983 as a 20-something kid from New Jersey with more talent than he probably knew what to do with. He spent 30 years helping build one of the most successful rock bands in history. He co-wrote anthems that defined a generation. He played guitar riffs that still give people chills. And then, one April night in 2013, when there was nothing left in the tank and everything in his personal life was demanding that he stop, he stopped. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but honestly. And now, more than a decade later, he's a father, a solo artist, a man who knows who he is outside of the machine. And Jon Bon Jovi, despite everything, has made it clear that the friendship, the real friendship underneath all of it, was never really gone. That's not a tragedy. That's a complicated, deeply human story about what happens when the music industry meets real life, and real life wins. And honestly, after everything Richie went through, I think it should have won a little sooner. Thanks for watching Hidden Fame Files. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We do this stuff all the time. And if you've got a story you want us to dig into next, leave it in the comments below. We read every single one. We'll see you in the next one.